"Ma'am, step away from the truck and keep your hands where I can see them." The voice cut through the diesel-thick air like it owned the night, sharp and practiced, the kind that didn't ask twice. Naomi Carter didn't flinch. She stood beside her rig, one hand still holding a damp paper towel from the restroom sink, the other resting loosely against her thigh, fingers relaxed, not raised, not defensive, just there. The overhead lights of the rest stop hummed above her, casting that sterile white glow that made everything look colder than it was, even in late summer heat. Her truck, an 18-wheeler with faded blue paint and road dust baked into every seam, idled behind her, engine ticking like it was catching its breath after a long haul. 48 states in 12 days. That was the job. That was always the job. Deputy Travis Boone stepped closer, boots heavy on the concrete, hand hovering just near his belt like it belonged there by default. He didn't look at her like a driver. He looked at her like a question already answered. "You driving this vehicle?" he asked, though the logo on the door and the keys in her ignition said enough. Naomi turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze without challenge, without apology. "I was," she said, voice even, carrying none of the tension that had already filled the space between them. Officer Kyle Mercer circled toward the back of the truck, younger, quicker, his eyes scanning everything like he expected something to jump out and prove him right. "Mind telling us what you're hauling tonight?" Mercer called out, tapping the side of the trailer with his knuckles, the hollow sound echoing faintly across the near-empty lot. A couple of other drivers lingered by vending machines, pretending not to watch. Naomi folded the paper towel once, twice, then tucked it into her jacket pocket. "Freight," she replied. Boone exhaled through his nose, a quiet, amused sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Freight," he repeated, like it was a joke she didn't understand. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the scent of hot asphalt and burnt coffee from inside the rest stop. Naomi's gaze drifted past Boone for just a second, barely noticeable, almost accidental, toward the far end of the lot where a refrigerated truck sat parked in shadow, its engine off, too still compared to everything else. Then she looked back at him, calm, present, unmoved. Boone caught the glance, but read it wrong. "You nervous about something?" he asked, tilting his head, stepping closer into her space now, testing how much of it she would give up. Naomi didn't step back. "No," she said simply. Mercer reappeared, wiping his hands on his pants. "Trailer's sealed," he said, but there was something in his tone, uncertain, unfinished. Boone didn't look at him. His attention stayed locked on Naomi like she was the center of the scene he'd already decided he was controlling. "We're gonna need you to open it anyway," Boone said, casual on the surface, but there was pressure underneath it, the kind that didn't leave room for refusal. Naomi's eyes flicked briefly to his badge, then to his nameplate, then back to his face. Details, always details. The fluorescent light reflected off the metal edges, cold and precise. "Is this a standard inspection?" she asked. The question landed differently than anything else she'd said. Boone paused, just for half a beat. Mercer looked between them. The hum of the lights seemed louder now, filling the silence that stretched a little too long. Boone smiled, but it was thinner this time. "It is now," he said. Naomi inhaled slowly, steady, controlled, like she was measuring more than just the air. Behind her, the rig's engine ticked again, a soft metallic rhythm, heat cooling under the night sky. She adjusted her stance, just slightly, weight shifting onto one leg, not defensive, not compliant, just grounded. Another glance, quick, precise, toward that same dark corner of the lot. The refrigerated truck hadn't moved. Not yet. Mercer followed her line of sight this time, squinting slightly, but whatever he thought he saw didn't settle into certainty. Boone didn't notice. He was too focused on the woman in front of him, the one who wasn't reacting the way she was supposed to. "Go ahead," Boone said, gesturing toward the trailer. "Let's take a look inside." Naomi didn't reach for the keys. Didn't argue. Didn't comply either. She just stood there, eyes steady, posture unchanged, like she was waiting for something else to happen first. The kind of stillness that didn't come from fear. The kind that came from knowing more than she was saying. Mercer shifted again, glancing back toward the far end of the lot, then at Boone, uncertainty creeping in around the edges. Naomi finally spoke. Her voice low, controlled, almost gentle. "You're looking in the wrong place." Boone's smile faded just a fraction, something tightening in his jaw as the words settled. And then, somewhere behind them, an engine quietly turned over. The low hum of the engine rolling to life did not belong to Naomi's truck, and that was the first thing that shifted the air. It came from the far end of the lot, quiet but deliberate, like something trying not to be noticed, and Naomi's eyes moved there again without turning her head, just a subtle flick that Mercer caught this time, while Boone did not. Boone was still watching her, still expecting movement, compliance, something that fit the version of the situation he had already written in his mind. "You hear that?" Mercer asked, his voice lower now, less certain than before, his attention splitting between Naomi and the shadowed corner beyond the rows of parked rigs. Boone did not look away. "Stay focused," he said, the words clipped, controlled, like he was tightening his grip on the moment. Naomi shifted her weight again, slow, measured, the kind of movement that did not escalate anything but also did not give anything away. The overhead lights buzzed, a faint electrical whisper, and somewhere a vending machine clanked as a soda dropped, the sound oddly loud against the tension building in the open space. "I am focused," Naomi said, her tone steady, not raised, not defensive, just clear. "That is why I said it." Boone's jaw tightened. "Said what?" he asked, even though he had heard her the first time. Naomi let a second pass, just enough to make the silence stretch again, then answered, "You are looking in the wrong place." Mercer turned his head more fully now, eyes narrowing as he tried to make out the shape of the refrigerated truck in the distance, its white trailer barely catching the edge of the light. The engine there idled softer than Naomi's, almost too smooth, and that alone made it stand out if you knew what to listen for. Boone finally glanced over his shoulder, just a quick check, but it was the first time his attention broke from Naomi, and in that fraction of a second, something in the balance shifted. Naomi did not move. She did not step back or forward. She simply watched them both, her breathing slow, controlled, like she had already decided how much of this she was willing to let unfold. "You trying to redirect us?" Boone asked, turning back, suspicion sharpening his voice again as if he needed it to. "No," Naomi said. "I am telling you what matters." Mercer took a few steps toward the edge of the lot, not fully committing, just enough to change his angle, to see past the row of parked trailers. The refrigerated truck's headlights flickered once, then steadied, casting a thin beam across the pavement. "That truck was not running a minute ago," Mercer said, more to himself than to Boone. Boone exhaled, irritation creeping back in, because now the scene was no longer as simple as he wanted it to be. "A lot of trucks are not running until they are," he replied, dismissive, but the edge in his tone had dulled. Naomi's gaze followed Mercer briefly, then returned to Boone. "You asked what I am hauling," she said quietly. "You did not ask what I am watching." The words landed heavier than before, not louder, but more precise, like they had been placed exactly where they needed to be. Boone studied her face, searching for something he could pin down, something that made her fit into the category he was comfortable with, but she did not give him anything like that. No nervous glance, no defensive posture, no rush to explain. Just that same stillness, the kind that did not belong to someone caught off guard. The refrigerated truck's engine revved slightly, a subtle increase, and the vehicle began to inch forward, slow enough that it could almost pass as routine, but not slow enough to be ignored once you were looking at it. Mercer stopped walking and turned back toward Boone, uncertainty now clear in his expression. "You want me to check that?" he asked. Boone hesitated, and it was small, but it was there, the kind of pause that came when control started slipping just enough to be felt. His eyes moved from Mercer to Naomi and back again, recalculating. Naomi said nothing. She did not push. She did not insist. She simply let the moment exist, letting them arrive at it on their own. The wind picked up again, tugging lightly at the edge of her jacket, carrying the faint hum of that other engine across the lot. Boone straightened slightly, his posture, shifting from confrontation to decision, but the certainty that had been there before was no longer as solid. "Hold on," he said, more to himself this time, his gaze narrowing toward the moving truck. Mercer did not wait for a second instruction. He was already watching it, already sensing that whatever was happening was not lining up with the story they had started with. Naomi finally took a small step, not away, not toward them, but just enough to change her angle, to keep both men and the distant truck in view. Her voice, when she spoke again, was softer than before, but it carried further. "If you keep me here," she said, "you are going to miss it." Boone's head turned sharply back to her, something like realization flickering behind his eyes, not fully formed, not yet accepted, but no longer absent. And for the first time since he had walked up to her truck, he was not entirely sure what he was standing in the middle of. The refrigerated truck rolled a little faster now, its tires whispering over the concrete as it angled toward the exit lane, and Mercer took another step after it before stopping, waiting for Boone's call. Boone opened his mouth, then closed it again, the decision hanging there for just a beat too long. Naomi did not look at either of them now. Her eyes stayed fixed on the moving truck, steady, certain, like she had been tracking it long before they ever noticed it. And that was when Boone realized this was never just about her truck. Boone moved before he could fully explain the decision. A sharp turn of his shoulders toward the exit lane as the refrigerated truck picked up just enough speed to feel intentional. And the shift in him was visible now. Not authority but reaction, not control but pursuit. Mercer did not wait this time. Already stepping faster, boots scraping the concrete as he angled toward his patrol car parked under the dimmer edge of the lights. Naomi stayed where she was for exactly one breath longer, watching the alignment change, watching Boone's attention finally detach from her and lock onto the right variable. And there was no satisfaction in her expression, no victory, just a quiet confirmation that the moment had turned the way it needed to. "Call it in," Mercer said, already reaching for his radio, voice tighter than before, the earlier confidence replaced by something closer to urgency. Boone did not answer immediately. His eyes tracked the refrigerated truck as it rolled past the last row of parked rigs, its white trailer now catching more light, revealing no markings, no company name, just blank surface and motion. That alone was enough to bother him. Trucks always carried identity. This one did not. "Hold on," Boone said, but the words lacked the firmness they had carried earlier, as if he was still trying to decide whether he was correcting a mistake or creating a new one. Naomi exhaled slowly, her breath barely visible in the cooler night air, and for the first time she reached into her jacket, not quickly, not hidden, just deliberate, pulling out a small, worn notebook, the kind drivers used for logs, but she did not open it yet. She simply held it, fingers resting along the edge, like a placeholder for something she had not revealed. Mercer glanced back at her, just once, and in that glance there was a shift, subtle but real, the first hint that he was no longer entirely sure she belonged in the category they had placed her in minutes ago. "It is heading for the exit," Mercer said, raising his voice slightly as the truck's tires crossed from the parking area toward the access road, the low rumble now stretching farther across the night. Boone's jaw tightened again, but this time not from irritation. This time it was calculation catching up to him. "Get in the car," he said, the command reflex returning, though it sounded different now, less like dominance and more like necessity. Mercer moved immediately, opening the driver's side door of the patrol car, the interior light flashing on for a brief second before fading as he slid inside. Boone took 2 steps after him, then stopped, turning back one more time toward Naomi, as if something unfinished still held him there. Naomi met his gaze, steady, unreadable, the overhead light drawing a clean line along her cheekbone, her eyes reflecting just enough to show awareness, not fear. "If you lose it," she said quietly, "you will not get a second chance." Boone held her look for a fraction longer than he needed to, something in her tone cutting through the noise of the moment, not because it was loud, but because it carried certainty he could not ignore. Then he turned, heading toward the passenger side of the patrol car, pulling the door open with more force than necessary before getting in. The engine of the patrol car roared to life, louder than the refrigerated truck, the red and blue lights still off, but the intent clear as Mercer shifted into gear and pulled forward, tires chirping lightly against the pavement before gripping. Naomi remained where she was, her own truck idling behind her, the steady ticking of cooling metal continuing its quiet rhythm, and for a moment the lot seemed to stretch wider, emptier, as the focal point of tension moved away from her and toward the exit. She finally opened the notebook, flipping it once, not to read but to confirm, a small detail, a time, a sequence already committed to memory, and then she closed it again. The refrigerated truck reached the edge of the rest stop, its headlights sweeping briefly across a sign that read Interstate Access in reflective green, the arrow pointing toward the highway like a path already chosen. Mercer's patrol car followed, closing distance but not yet catching up, the gap between them holding just long enough to matter. Boone leaned forward slightly in his seat, eyes fixed ahead, his earlier certainty replaced by a sharper focus, the kind that came when the situation no longer fit assumptions. "Call it in now," he said. Finally, his voice firmer again, but different, grounded in what was actually happening rather than what he had expected. Mercer grabbed the radio, pressing the button, his words coming quicker, more precise, as he reported the moving vehicle, the location, the direction. Naomi watched the taillights disappear beyond the edge of the lot, the red glow shrinking as distance took over, and the sound of both engines faded into the wider hum of the highway beyond. The rest stop settled again, quieter, but not the same as before. A truck door slammed somewhere in the distance. The vending machine hummed. The overhead lights buzzed. And Naomi stood alone beside her rig, the only person in the lot who had not needed to move to understand what was happening. She slid the notebook back into her jacket, her hand lingering there for a second longer than necessary, then dropping to her side. Her gaze stayed fixed on the road. Where the two vehicles had just gone, her expression unchanged, calm but alert, like she was still inside the moment even as it stretched beyond her reach. Because for her, it had never been about staying or leaving. It had always been about timing. And right now, the timing was shifting again. In the distance, faint but growing, another set of headlights began to approach the rest stop. The approaching headlights did not slow as they entered the rest stop, and that alone set them apart from every other vehicle that had pulled in that night. They moved with purpose, cutting through the dim edges of the lot before easing into a controlled stop several yards from Naomi's truck, the engine idling low but steady, the kind of quiet that suggested precision rather than hesitation. Naomi did not turn immediately. She let the sound settle first, listening to the difference between this engine and the others, the smoother cadence, the absence of unnecessary rev. Then she shifted her gaze, just enough to take in the dark sedan now parked under the weaker spill of light. The doors did not open right away. For a moment, nothing happened. The rest stop held its breath again, suspended between what had just left and what had just arrived. Naomi's posture remained unchanged, one hand relaxed at her side, the other brushing lightly against the seam of her jacket where the notebook rested, her eyes steady, alert but not tense. The driver's side door of the sedan opened with a soft click, followed by the passenger's side a second later, both movements timed, controlled, almost rehearsed. Two figures stepped out, their silhouettes clean against the headlights for a brief second before the doors closed behind them, muting the light and returning the scene to its earlier dimness. Naomi recognized the walk before she saw the faces clearly, the pace measured, the spacing between them deliberate, neither rushed nor casual. She exhaled once, quietly. Special Agent Daniel Reeves stepped into the brighter edge of the overhead light, his expression already scanning, already processing, eyes moving from Naomi to the empty stretch of lot where Boone and Mercer had been moments ago, then toward the exit where the refrigerated truck had disappeared. "You are still here," Reeves said, his voice calm, but there was a layer beneath it, not surprise, but calculation adjusting. Naomi nodded slightly. "They took the bait," she replied. Reeves's partner, a woman in a dark jacket with no visible insignia, stopped a few feet behind him, her attention fixed on the same direction Naomi had been watching, the line of the road leading out. "Local?" she asked. Naomi answered without looking at her. "County," she said. 2 units. They were not supposed to be involved. Reeves's jaw tightened just enough to register the complication. He glanced at Naomi again, this time longer, taking in the stillness, the lack of visible strain, the fact that she had not needed to escalate to maintain control. "Did you expose?" he asked. Naomi shook her head once. "Not fully," she said. "Just enough to redirect." Reeves let out a slow breath, his eyes shifting back toward the road. In the distance, faint but present, the glow of moving lights suggested Boone and Mercer were still in pursuit, still within range, but the gap was not closing as quickly as it should have been. "That vehicle should not have moved yet," the second agent said, her voice low, precise. Naomi's gaze did not waver. It moved because they forced a timeline, she replied. They focused on me. The words were not an accusation. They were a statement of sequence, cause and effect laid out without emotion. Reeves took a step closer, lowering his voice slightly. Can they hold it? He asked. Naomi paused, just for a fraction, then answered, only if they realize what they are actually following. The overhead light flickered once, a brief dimming before returning to its steady hum. And in that momentary shift, the edges of the scene felt sharper, the space between actions more defined. Reeves turned his head slightly, listening to something through the small earpiece tucked behind his ear, his expression tightening as information came through. They are calling it in now, he said. Late, but not too late. Naomi's shoulders remained level, her breathing unchanged, but her eyes narrowed just slightly, focusing on something beyond the visible, the pattern forming in her mind as the pieces moved. They are going to hesitate, she said quietly. Reeves looked at her. Why? Naomi answered without pause. Because they are still trying to decide if they were right about me. The statement hung in the air, simple, direct, and it landed with more weight than the situation alone could explain. The second agent shifted her stance, glancing between Naomi and Reeves, understanding threading through her expression. And that hesitation costs distance, she said. Naomi nodded once. Every second. Reeves turned fully toward the road now, his posture aligning with action rather than analysis. We move, he said, already stepping back toward the sedan. The second agent followed immediately, opening the passenger door, but Reeves paused for just a moment longer, looking back at Naomi. You coming? He asked. Naomi did not answer right away. Her gaze stayed fixed on the exit, on the invisible line where the two patrol units and the refrigerated truck were now moving farther into the night. The rest stop behind her felt smaller now, quieter, like it had already been left behind even though she had not moved. She reached into her jacket again, this time pulling out a small, flat device, her thumb brushing over its surface once before holding it still at her side. Then she looked at Reeves. I was always going to, she said. Reeves gave a short nod, turning back toward the car, sliding into the driver's seat as the engine remained running, ready. The second agent settled in beside him, already reaching for the dashboard controls. Naomi took one step forward, then another, the gravel near the edge of the pavement crunching softly under her boots as she moved away from her truck for the first time since the scene had begun. Behind her, the rig continued to idle, steady and patient, as if it would be there whenever she returned. She reached the sedan, her hand brushing briefly against the roof before opening the rear door and sliding inside. The interior light flicking on for a second before fading as the door closed. Reeves did not wait. The sedan pulled out smoothly, turning toward the exit, headlights cutting a clean path across the pavement. As they approached the edge of the lot, Naomi leaned slightly forward, her voice low but clear. They are about to make the wrong call. The sedan merged onto the access road with a smooth acceleration that felt controlled but urgent, the headlights stretching forward into the dark ribbon of highway. As Naomi leaned slightly between the front seats, her eyes fixed ahead, tracking movement that was no longer visible but still mapped clearly in her mind. Inside the car, the air felt tighter, filled with the quiet hum of electronics and the faint static of a radio channel that had just become more important than anyone had planned. They are going to slow down, Naomi said, her voice calm, precise, not guessing but stating. Reeves glanced at her briefly, then back to the road. Why would they slow down now? He asked, already pushing the sedan faster, the speed climbing past 60, then 70 miles per hour as they approached the interstate ramp. Naomi did not hesitate. Because they are second-guessing the stop, she replied. They think they may have overreached. The second agent adjusted the radio frequency, listening as Mercer's voice broke through, slightly distorted but clear enough to follow. Dispatch, we have a vehicle leaving the rest area, no visible markings, heading eastbound, requesting guidance. There was a pause, then the dispatcher responded, asking for confirmation, for details, for reasons that should have been decided already. Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. There, she said softly. That is the hesitation. Reeves pressed the accelerator further, the engine responding with a deeper tone as the sedan climbed the ramp, merging onto the interstate where the night opened wide and the distance between vehicles mattered more with every second. "They are waiting for approval," the second agent said, her voice low, analytical. Naomi nodded once. "And approval takes time." Ahead of them, far down the highway, faint red taillights flickered, two sets moving together but not aligned, one slightly ahead of the other, the gap shifting in a way that suggested uncertainty rather than control. Reeves leaned forward slightly, his grip tightening on the wheel, his focus sharpening as the pieces began to align with Naomi's earlier warning. "Which one is ours?" he asked. Naomi's gaze locked onto the pattern, not the lights themselves but the rhythm of their movement, the way one vehicle maintained a steady pace while the other adjusted, reacting instead of leading. "The one that is not reacting," she said. "The one that already knows where it is going." The second agent followed her line of reasoning, her eyes tracking the same distant points of light. "Front vehicle," she confirmed. "The rear one is adjusting speed." Reeves nodded, pushing the sedan faster, closing the distance incrementally, the highway stretching ahead in long, uninterrupted lines of asphalt and reflective markers that flashed under the headlights in steady intervals. On the radio, Mercer's voice came. Again, tighter now. "Dispatch, we are maintaining visual, but the driver is not responding to signals." Boone's voice cut in a second later, more controlled but edged with something new, something less certain. "Advise on whether to initiate full stop." Naomi's expression did not change, but her voice dropped slightly, quieter, more focused. "If they ask, they will wait," she said. "And if they wait, they will lose position." Reeves did not respond with words this time. He simply pressed the accelerator harder, the sedan surging forward, the engine rising in pitch as the distance began to shrink more noticeably. The second agent adjusted the radio again, her fingers moving quickly, bypassing the open channel and switching to a more direct line. "We cannot let them call this wrong," she said. Naomi leaned forward a fraction more, her eyes never leaving the road ahead. "They already are," she replied. The taillights in the distance shifted again, the front vehicle drifting slightly toward the right lane, the movement subtle but intentional, as if preparing for something just beyond the visible stretch of highway. The patrol car behind it adjusted too late, the gap widening for a brief moment before closing again, but not enough to regain full control of the situation. Reeves exhaled slowly, steadying his focus. "We are taking over," he said, more to himself than to anyone else, the decision forming as the evidence aligned in front of him. Naomi's hand moved slightly, the small device she held now resting against her palm, her thumb hovering over its surface but not pressing yet. Timing. Always timing. The radio crackled again, the dispatcher's voice layered with uncertainty, asking for confirmation, for justification, for steps that should have already been taken. Boone answered, but there was a hesitation in his tone now, a fraction of doubt that had not been there before, and Naomi heard it clearly. "They are still thinking about me," she said quietly. Reeves glanced at her again, understanding settling deeper. "And that is costing them the lead," he said. Naomi did not respond. She did not need to. The pattern ahead was already proving it. The front vehicle's taillights flickered once, then shifted lanes again, the movement more decisive now, as if the driver had recognized the hesitation behind them and was adjusting accordingly. The patrol car followed, but the gap stretched just enough to matter, just enough to create space that could not be easily recovered. Reeves tightened his grip on the wheel, pushing the sedan closer, the speed now matching the urgency of the situation rather than the caution of protocol. The second agent leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked on the same point Naomi had been tracking since the beginning. "We are almost in range," she said. Naomi's thumb hovered over the device for one more second, then stilled again, her voice calm, certain. "Not yet," she said. Reeves did not question it. He held the speed, held the line, closing the distance without forcing the moment too early. The highway stretched ahead, the two sets of taillights growing clearer now, the separation between them more defined, the consequences of every second more visible. And then, just as the gap narrowed enough to act, the front vehicle made a sudden, deliberate move toward an unlit exit ramp that had not been marked on the last mile. The unlit exit ramp appeared almost too late to be real, a dark cut in the highway that most drivers would miss unless they already knew it was there, and the refrigerated truck took it without hesitation, its taillights dipping out of the main flow of traffic like it had been waiting for that exact moment all along. Reeves reacted instantly, guiding the sedan toward the same exit, the tires shifting from the smooth hum of interstate asphalt to the rougher texture of a neglected off-ramp, the sound changing just enough to mark the transition from open road to something more contained. That was not random, the second agent said, her voice low but certain, already adjusting her posture as the environment changed. Naomi leaned forward slightly, her eyes tracking the disappearing glow of the truck's lights as they curved down into darkness. No, she said. That was planned. Behind them, the distant flicker of Boone and Mercer's patrol car hesitated for just a fraction too long before committing to the exit, the delay small but measurable, the kind that turned seconds into distance. Reeves did not slow. The sedan followed the curve, descending into a stretch of road that felt narrower, the overhead lighting gone now, replaced by scattered reflectors and the occasional flicker of distant industrial lights far off to the side. The air felt different here, quieter, heavier, like the space itself was less traveled, less observed. We are off the main grid, Reeves said, more as confirmation than concern, his eyes scanning the road ahead for movement. Naomi nodded once. That is where they wanted to go, she replied. The refrigerated truck's taillights reappeared briefly at the bottom of the ramp, then shifted again, turning onto a side road that ran parallel to a line of dark structures, low buildings or storage units, their outlines barely visible against the night. Reeves adjusted the wheel, following the same path, the sedan's headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the darkness as they closed the distance. The radio crackled again, Boone's voice coming through with more urgency now. We have exited the interstate, continuing pursuit. The dispatcher responded, asking for location, for confirmation, for details that were now harder to provide as the road lost its clear markers. Naomi listened, her expression unchanged, but her eyes sharpened slightly. They are losing orientation, she said quietly. The second agent glanced at the dashboard, then back at the road. There are no clear mile markers here, she said. No standard signage. Naomi nodded. Exactly. The sedan moved faster now, the engine rising slightly as Reeves pushed to regain the distance lost earlier, the headlights catching the edge of the refrigerated truck again, closer now, its movement steady, confident, as if the driver knew every turn ahead. We are within range, Reeves said. Naomi's hand tightened slightly around the device she held, her thumb brushing its surface again, but still not pressing. Timing. Always timing. The road ahead curved again, this time more sharply, the edges lined with gravel that crunched under the sedan's tires as Reeves adjusted his speed just enough to maintain control without losing momentum. The refrigerated truck slowed slightly as it approached a cluster of structures, large metal buildings with closed doors and no visible activity, the kind of place that did not draw attention during the day and disappeared entirely at night. This is a transfer point, the second agent said, her voice tightening as the pattern became clearer. Naomi's gaze fixed on the truck. It was always a transfer, she replied. Behind them, the patrol car's lights finally flicked on, red and blue flashing against the darkness, reflecting off the metal surfaces ahead in brief, scattered bursts. The delay had cost them, but they were still in it. Boone's voice came through again, more forceful now. Vehicle, pull over. The command echoed faintly across the radio, but the refrigerated truck did not respond, its movement continuing, steady, controlled, as it approached the largest of the buildings. Not in a way the eye could track directly, but in the way sound changed, in the way the sedan's headlights scattered across metal surfaces and came back fragmented, revealing outlines that had not been visible from the outside, shapes of stacked crates, partial silhouettes of equipment, and something else that shifted just beyond the direct beam. Reeves did not slow as the sedan crossed the threshold, the tires transitioning from gravel to smooth concrete with a hollow echo that expanded into the wide interior. Naomi's thumb pressed the device. It was a small movement, almost invisible, but it changed everything. A faint signal pulsed out, silent to the ear, precise in intent. Tracker is live, she said, her voice steady, low, cutting cleanly through the enclosed space. The refrigerated truck had already moved deeper inside, its brake lights dimming as it rolled toward the far end of the building, where a second opening, partially concealed by shadows, suggested another exit point. There is a secondary route, the second agent said, her eyes catching the outline just as Naomi had. Reeves adjusted the wheel, angling the sedan slightly left to keep the truck centered in view, but the distance between them remained narrow, tight enough that every movement mattered. Behind them, the flashing lights of Boone and Mercer's patrol cars spilled into the building, red and blue reflecting off metal walls in sharp, disorienting patterns, announcing their presence in a way that could not be ignored. Naomi's eyes flicked once toward the entrance, then back to the truck. They just told everyone we are here, she said quietly. Reeves did not respond. He was already compensating, already adjusting for the new variable, his focus narrowing to the path ahead. The refrigerated truck slowed further, then shifted direction slightly, aligning itself toward the darker opening at the far end, the movement smooth, practiced, not rushed. They are not stopping, the second agent said. Naomi shook her head once. They were never going to stop, she replied. The sedan closed the gap by a few more feet, the headlights now fully illuminating the rear of the truck, the blank surface of the trailer reflecting the light back in a flat, featureless glare. Naomi leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning the edges of the space. Not just the truck, but everything around it. The corners, the shadows, the places where movement could hide. Watch the sides, she said. Reeves nodded almost imperceptibly, adjusting his line just enough to widen their angle of view without losing forward momentum. The sound inside the building shifted again, a faint metallic echo from somewhere to the right, not loud, but distinct, the kind of sound that did not belong to the truck or their own movement. The second agent turned her head slightly toward it, her posture tightening. There are more people here, she said. Naomi's expression did not change, but her voice dropped a fraction lower. Yes, she said. And they are waiting. The refrigerated truck reached the midpoint of the building, then slowed to a near stop, its brake lights glowing again, casting a deep red wash across the concrete floor. For a moment, everything held, the space tightening into a single suspended second where no one moved forward or back. Then the truck's engine idled lower, the sound dropping just enough to signal a transition. Reeves eased off the accelerator slightly, not stopping, but not closing further either, holding the position, waiting for the next move. The patrol car behind them pulled in fully now, its lights still flashing, filling the interior with alternating color that fractured the shadows and made it harder to read the space clearly. Boone's voice came through the radio, louder now, more urgent. Vehicle, shut it down and step out. The command echoed inside the building, bouncing off metal and concrete, losing clarity as it spread. Naomi exhaled slowly. They are still talking, she said. Reeves's jaw tightened. And that is buying them time, he replied. The rear doors of the refrigerated truck did not open. Instead, the truck began to roll again, slowly, deliberately, inching toward the darker opening at the far end. The movement was subtle, almost cautious, but it was enough. They are transitioning, the second agent said. Naomi's eyes locked onto the narrowing gap between the truck and the far exit, calculating distance, timing, angles. If it clears that opening, we lose containment, she said. Reeves did not wait. He pressed the accelerator again, the sedan surging forward, closing the distance rapidly now, the headlights tightening into a focused beam that locked onto the truck's rear. The sound of the engine filled the space, louder, more immediate, cutting through the echo of Boone's voice still issuing commands behind them. Naomi's hand steadied against the back of the front seat, her body leaning slightly with the motion, her focus absolute. The truck's front wheels crossed into the shadow of the second exit, the darkness beyond swallowing the edges of its shape. The gap was closing, but not fast enough to guarantee control. Angle left, Naomi said sharply. Reeves adjusted instantly, the sedan shifting just enough to change the line of approach, narrowing the escape path without making direct contact, forcing the truck into a tighter trajectory. The second agent braced, her eyes fixed on the narrowing space ahead. The patrol car behind them surged forward as well, but the flashing lights still distorted the scene, still made the angles harder to read. Naomi's voice cut through again, precise, controlled. Do not let them see hesitation. Reeves held the line, steady, committed, the sedan now nearly parallel with the rear of the truck, the distance between them measured in feet rather than yards. The truck slowed again, just for a fraction, as if reassessing, as if the driver inside had recognized the shift in pressure. And in that fraction of time, something changed in the air, a subtle recalibration that Naomi felt before she saw. They did not expect this, she said quietly. Reeves did not look at her. He did not need to. The movement ahead told him enough. The truck hesitated, just slightly, just enough to open a window that had not been there before. And then, from the shadows near the far exit, a second set of lights flickered on. The second set of lights did not rush forward. They came on slowly, deliberately, two narrow beams cutting through the far end of the building and holding steady, not blinding, not aggressive, just present in a way that forced every eye in the room to adjust. Naomi saw it first for what it was, not an attack, not an escape, but a position, something placed exactly where it needed to be to change the shape of the moment without making noise. They have a receiver, the second agent said, her voice tightening as the outline of a smaller box truck began to form behind the glare, parked at an angle that aligned perfectly with the rear of the refrigerated trailer. Reeves did not slow, but he did not accelerate either. He held the line, the sedan now nearly parallel to the larger truck. The space between them compressed into something fragile, something that could break either way depending on the next second. Naomi leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning the alignment, the distance between the two vehicles, the angle of the smaller truck's position, the way its rear doors were already open, waiting. It is a transfer lane, she said quietly. Fast, quiet, no exposure. The refrigerated truck rolled the last few feet, then stopped with precision, its rear doors facing the open cargo space of the smaller vehicle, the gap between them no more than a few yards, close enough to move quickly, far enough to adjust if needed. The building seemed to hold its breath again, the echoes settling into a low hum as the engines idled. Behind them, Boone's patrol car surged closer, the red and blue lights still flashing, reflecting off every surface and fracturing the scene into sharp, shifting colors that made it harder to read intent. They are about to initiate, the second agent said. Naomi's hand tightened slightly against the back of the seat. No, she said. They are waiting to see if we hesitate. Reeves's eyes narrowed, his focus locking into the space between the two trucks, the narrow corridor where everything would happen. Then we do not, he replied. The sedan edged forward another foot, then another, not enough to block, but enough to claim presence, to make it clear that the moment would not pass uncontested. The smaller truck's headlights dimmed slightly, adjusting to the interior light, revealing more detail now, the clean edges of its cargo bay, the reinforced panels, the kind of modifications that did not belong to standard freight work. Naomi's gaze sharpened. That is not a normal unit, she said. The second agent nodded, already seeing the same details. Custom build, she confirmed. Designed for quick transfer. The air shifted again, a subtle change in pressure, the kind that came when multiple decisions aligned at once. Boone's voice cut through the radio, louder now, edged with urgency. All units, hold position, do not engage until. The transmission broke slightly, the signal distorting as the enclosed space interfered. Naomi closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them again. They are still waiting for permission, she said. Reeves did not respond with words, he simply moved. The sedan surged forward, closing the remaining gap, the headlights now fully illuminating the narrow corridor between the two trucks, the light flattening shadows and exposing movement that had been hidden seconds before. Figures shifted at the edges of the cargo space, not rushing, not panicking, but adjusting, recalibrating as the timeline compressed. The refrigerated truck's rear doors remained closed, but the latch mechanism moved slightly, a small metallic shift that caught Naomi's attention instantly. They are about to open, she said. Reeves adjusted his angle again, positioning the sedan just enough to disrupt the straight line between the two vehicles without making direct contact, forcing any movement to adapt, to slow. The second agent reached for her radio, switching channels with quick, precise movements. We are taking operational lead, she said into the mic, her voice clear, controlled, cutting through the static. All units hold and maintain perimeter. Boone's voice came back, sharper now, resistance threading through it. This is our stop. We are already engaged. Naomi leaned forward, her voice low but firm. If they engage wrong, it collapses, she said. Reeves's jaw tightened, but he did not waver. The sedan held its position, engine steady, headlights fixed, creating a barrier of light that forced every movement in front of them to be visible. The smaller truck's engine idled lower, the sound dropping into a near whisper, as if the driver inside was reassessing, recalculating the new variables. The refrigerated truck remained still, but the tension around it shifted, the sense of imminent motion tightening like a drawn line. Naomi's thumb hovered over the device again, her breathing steady, her eyes tracking the exact moment where action would begin. They are deciding whether to abort, she said quietly. Reeves did not look away from the scene ahead. And what happens if they do? He asked. Naomi's answer came without hesitation. Then they scatter, she said, and we lose the chain. The words settled into the space between them, heavy with implication, not loud, but impossible to ignore. The second agent's hand tightened around the radio. We cannot let that happen, she said. Naomi's gaze did not waver. Then we do not give them the option, she replied. The latch on the refrigerated truck shifted again, this time more clearly, the metal clicking into release. The gap between the two vehicles seemed to narrow even without movement, the space compressing as the moment arrived. Reeves leaned forward slightly, his focus absolute, his hands steady on the wheel. The sedan held its ground, the light unbroken, the line drawn. And just as the doors began to separate, something unexpected echoed from behind them. The sound from behind them was not an engine or a voice, but something sharper, a metallic roll followed by a heavy click, like a door being sealed into place, and it shifted the entire balance of the space in an instant. Naomi turned her head just slightly, not enough to lose sight of the trucks ahead, but enough to register the change at the entrance they had come through. The wide bay door was moving, slowly at first, then with increasing certainty, the metal panel descending from above, cutting off the open night and replacing it with a narrowing frame of darkness that would soon disappear completely. They are closing us in, the second agent said, her voice tight now, the realization landing with precision. Reeves did not look back. His focus stayed forward, but his grip on the wheel adjusted, subtle, controlled. Not yet, he said. Naomi's eyes flicked once to the shrinking opening behind them, then back to the trucks. It is not for containment, she said quietly. It is for control. The words settled differently, heavier, because they reframed the moment entirely. The refrigerated truck's rear doors had begun to part, just inches now, a thin seam of darkness opening between them, but the motion slowed, almost paused, as if whoever was inside had also registered the shift in the environment. The smaller truck ahead remained still, its open cargo bay waiting, but no movement crossed the gap yet. Everything had stalled, suspended in a new calculation. Boone's patrol car idled behind them, lights still flashing, the colors now bouncing off the descending metal door, creating a flicker that grew more chaotic as the opening narrowed. What are they doing? Boone's voice cut through the radio, louder now, edged with frustration and something else, something closer to uncertainty. Naomi did not answer him. Her attention stayed locked on the trucks, on the space between them, on the timing that was slipping. They are resetting the board, she said instead, her voice low, meant for Reeves and the agent beside him. Reeves exhaled slowly, the weight of the situation settling into a clearer shape. They want to force a single exit, he said. Naomi nodded once. And they want to choose when it happens. The metal door behind them dropped lower, the opening now reduced to a narrow strip of night, the outside world fading into a thin line that would soon be gone. The sound of it closing filled the space, a deep, grinding tone that pressed against the silence, making every second feel heavier. The refrigerated truck's doors stopped moving entirely now, frozen halfway between closed and open, the seam still visible but no longer widening. The smaller truck ahead did not move either. The figures at the edges of the cargo bay had disappeared back into shadow, no longer visible in the direct beam of the sedan's headlights. They are waiting for us to commit, the second agent said. Naomi's gaze sharpened. No, she replied. They are waiting for them. She tilted her head slightly, indicating the patrol car behind them without looking away from the trucks. Reeves understood immediately. They want the wrong move, he said. Naomi's voice remained steady. They need it. Boone's voice came through the radio again, more forceful now, trying to reclaim control. All units, hold position, do not advance until we have. The transmission cut again, the signal breaking under the interference of the enclosed space. Mercer's voice followed, quicker, less controlled. We cannot just sit here. Naomi closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them, her expression unchanged but her focus deeper, more precise. If they push forward now, she said quietly, everything accelerates. Reeves's jaw tightened. And if they do not? Naomi answered without hesitation. Then the door closes. The words hung in the air, simple, absolute. Behind them, the metal panel dropped another few feet, the gap of night shrinking further, the outside now barely visible. The sound of it filled the building, a steady, unavoidable reminder that time was not just passing, it was being controlled. The refrigerated truck's engine idled lower, the sound dropping into a near whisper, as if even the machine was waiting for the next move. The smaller truck's headlights dimmed again, adjusting, conserving, holding. The entire space had become a standoff, not of force, but of timing, of who would act first and who would be forced to react. Naomi's hand tightened slightly around the device, her thumb hovering again, but she did not press it. Not yet. Reeves leaned forward just a fraction, his eyes locked on. The narrow corridor between the trucks, the place where everything would either break open or collapse inward. The second agent's hand hovered over the radio, ready, waiting for the exact second to speak. Boone's patrol car shifted slightly behind them, the engine revving just enough to signal movement, impatience, a decision forming that had not been fully thought through. Naomi heard it before she saw it, the change in engine tone, the slight forward roll. He is going to move, she said quietly. Reeves did not look back. He did not need to. The pattern was already clear. The metal door behind them dropped again, the opening now no more than a thin line of darkness at the top, seconds away from sealing completely. The trucks ahead remained still, but the tension around them tightened, like a held breath waiting to be released. Naomi's voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper, but it carried with absolute clarity. If he does, it all triggers. And just as the patrol car surged forward, the lights inside the smaller truck snapped fully on. The moment the smaller truck's interior lights snapped on, the entire space transformed, not brighter in a comforting way but sharper, exposing angles and edges that had been carefully hidden until now. The cargo bay revealed clean metal flooring, reinforced rails, and a set of parallel tracks embedded into the surface, designed not for storage but for movement, fast and controlled. Boone's patrol car surged forward from behind, exactly as Naomi had predicted, its headlights cutting across the sedan's rear and spilling into the narrow corridor between the trucks, and in that instant, the balance broke. He just triggered it, the second agent said, her voice tight, already shifting from observation to response. Naomi did not react outwardly, but her eyes locked onto the seam between the refrigerated truck's doors, watching as the slight opening widened by another inch. Then another, no longer hesitant, no longer waiting. Reeves leaned forward, his hands steady on the wheel, but the tension in his posture had changed. This was no longer about holding position, it was about controlling fallout. A deep, final sound that echoed through the building, cutting off the outside world completely. The air inside shifted, heavier now, enclosed, every sound contained within the walls. Boone's voice came through the radio, louder, sharper, but now edged with something closer to urgency than authority. Move in, he said, and the patrol car edged closer, narrowing the space further, but not in alignment with the scene, not with understanding, just with intent. Naomi exhaled slowly, her voice calm, almost quiet against the rising tension. Now they commit, she said. The refrigerated truck's doors opened fully in one smooth motion, revealing a dark interior that did not look like standard freight, the space inside organized with precision, not cluttered, not random, and for a brief second, everything paused again, not because of hesitation, but because all sides were recalculating at once. The smaller truck ahead remained open, its interior lights steady, the tracks inside now clearly aligned with the rear of the refrigerated trailer, forming a direct path between them. It is a slide transfer, the second agent said, recognizing the setup instantly. Naomi nodded once. Invisible change in the air, a signal reaching beyond the building, connecting to something already in motion. Reeves felt it before he understood it, a shift in timing, a synchronization that had not been there seconds ago. "What did you just do?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the scene ahead. Naomi did not look at him. "I told them we are no longer waiting," she said. The container moved faster now, sliding along the rails toward the gap, but the alignment was no longer perfect, the sedan's adjusted position forcing a slight angle. A delay, small but critical. Boone's voice rose again over the radio, overlapping commands, trying to regain control of a situation that had already moved beyond him. "Hold, hold, do not." The words broke, lost in the echo and interference. The patrol car edged closer again, but the angle was still wrong, still reacting instead of leading. Low at first, then growing, a distant mechanical hum that did not belong to anything inside the building. The sound above them was steady, controlled, not chaotic like the echo of engines or voices, but mechanical in a way that suggested coordination rather than reaction, and Naomi recognized it immediately, not by volume, but by rhythm, the kind of low rotating hum that belonged to something circling with intent rather than passing through. Tightening, and for a moment, the entire building seemed to exist inside that sound, every surface reflecting it faintly. The smaller truck's interior lights flickered once, then steadied again, but the stillness around it was different now, no longer poised for immediate action, but waiting, assessing. Time, less certain, as if the earlier authority had been replaced by the need to understand. "What are we dealing with?" he asked. Naomi finally shifted her gaze, just for a moment, toward the rearview mirror, toward the reflection of the flashing lights behind them, then back to the trucks ahead. "Something bigger than a traffic stop," she said softly, not into the radio, not for him, but for the truth of the moment. Truck remained open, the container still inside. The transfer halted. The smaller truck's lights held, but no further movement came from the shadows. The figure stood alone in the beam, the only visible point of contact between both sides. Did not move. Her eyes stayed locked on the figure, her breathing steady, but something in her gaze shifted, not surprise, not confusion, but confirmation, a final piece sliding into place.